Welcome back to the Matter of Facts podcast on the Prepper Broadcasting Network. We talk prepping, guns, and politics every week on iTunes, Stitcher, and Spotify. Go check out our content at mwfpodcast.com on Facebook or Instagram. You can support us via Patreon or by checking out our affiliate partners. I'm your host, Phil Rabalais, and my co-host, Andrew Bobo, is on the other side of the mic, and here's your show. So, let me go ahead and give everybody the front-loaded warning that apparently Skynet has decided today is the day to start acting up and starting off the war against the humans, because, I don't know, there's some weird tech issues going on with the internet, and I don't think it's me or Andrew, it might be our streaming service, so those of you who are watching live, just be fair warned. If things suddenly go to the moon, I apologize, y'all have to listen to this in audio only later.
Or it could be the, I guess we could segue right into the one of the topics, and it could just be solar activity.
Yeah, I guess let's just go straight for that one. I was saving that one for last, but so you kind of brought this to my attention that like the latest and greatest boogaboo that is supposed to scare the holy hell out of all of us, and I'm sure somebody will be coming along very shortly to tell us it's all the fault of climate change and, you know, something humans have done to bring this upon ourselves so that they can justify more taxes upon us. But apparently, there's a worry about coronal mass ejection, magnetic storms, solar flares. Apparently, like the sun, of course, I didn't realize any of this till you clued me in and then I started reading up on it, but apparently the sun goes through roughly a 10-year cycle where it gets really, really spicy, and then it chills out and just keeps us from freezing to death. And we're entering the spicy phase. Is that about the long and short of it?
Yeah, I've been seeing conflicting. I mean, I've seen one website that says 10-year cycle. I've seen another that's 11-year cycle, but roughly around that time. And they're talking, and the experts, I guess use that quotes experts loosely, because how can you be a sun expert? I don't know. But basically, they're saying that the solar maximum, basically the peak time the sun was supposed to be spitting out like a crap ton of energy, was 2025. However, those quote unquote experts are wrong, and now they were like, sorry, it's actually this year. So and that's the thing is, I mean, who knows what's going to happen? Nothing could happen. Who knows? That's the thing, but it kind of goes into the whole thing of what should we do or what could happen, because I mean, as people who are self-sustaining or preparedness, we're into the what could happen kind of mindset. Mm-hmm. We'd like to prepare for what might happen. So one of the things that they're saying is you're looking at more disruption. They're saying that if anything gets really bad, they're saying actually like an internet blackout. It could just do some stuff to satellites and comms, of course, GPS, of course. But the big one that I've been hearing is internet. And honestly, you know what? I kind of wouldn't mind the internet to go out for like a week or two.
It'd be peaceful.
It'd be interesting to see people. Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting. I mean, we definitely wouldn't be able to do a show for the most part, depending on how bad it was affected. But I mean, it would be interesting to see people go back to growing up when we were kids growing up, and you had to go outside and play or amuse yourself, kind of thing. The people lose their minds. Now with that, you would lose. Along with the internet, you'd probably lose credit card, possibly anything that has to do with finances. The EBT people, they'd be kind of hosed. But I mean, this just kind of goes into, well, what should you do? Well, I mean, and I need to take my own advice and get cash. I need to get more cash, but have cash in the house. Have physical money in a safe, excuse me, in a safe lot. At least a couple thousand if you can, or even if you can, even $500, whatever you can do, like to throw some money into a little bank bag and put it in your safe, for whatever, because if you need to go get groceries and the ATM machines are down and the debit card and credit card machines aren't working, and I mean, if any of you guys have ever watched or read, rather, any of like Franklin Horton's books, any of the Glenn Tate, the 299 day series. I'm listening to one now that Jeff Kirkham that he wrote, the Black Autumn series.
Mm-hmm.
Um, any of these, like they all have one major thing in common, and it's all, I mean, besides the apocalypse and all that stuff, but it just and societal breakdown. But one big thing that I see that is a common thread is when things go south, you're looking at a cash only society or a barter system in a way, and that's the one thing that going across a lot of these books that I've listened to. It's cash only, $10 a gallon, or cash only for groceries, and people freaking out because their debit card's not working, people freaking out because their EBT card's not working. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to get, if it gets that bad. I don't want to get all doom and gloom and say, hey, it's going to, but be one of the people that are, they've been saying for years that climate change is going to kill us all and flood the earth. And I mean, they back it up every like 10 years. It seems like they pick a new year, but
10 more
but no,
years.
I mean, yeah, right. No, the next 10. But no, it just look at this, research it, look into it more, pay attention to it, because I mean, the sun does play a pretty big role in our lives. And there have been some ejections that I've read that happened recently that I've read that if they were pointing if they were pointing our direction, luckily they blew on the other side of the sun when the sun was facing away. That spot was facing away from us. But if they were to eject towards us, I mean, they said they're bad, and they're getting bad, and they're getting stronger. And so yeah, and then, so it's one of those things where let's look at what's going on and what can we do to better prepare ourselves for this. And the biggest thing is having cash or something on hand other than your debit card and credit card.
Yeah. Well, I mean, two things is like we've talked about this on the show. Like I've had two instances just in the last few months where I needed cash. And fortunately, I make a habit of carrying at least $100 cash on, in my wallet, and I have an emergency, break glass in case of emergency fund that stays here at the house. It's just a big roll of 20s and hundreds. And like I've had this argument with people before where they say, well, if it's a societal collapse, if it's like Franklin Horton, 2.0, cash won't be worth anything. And in the long term, I agree with them, but in the short term, cash will still have some perceived value and will grease palms. So, like, if you're that person that says it won't have value, I would say that for the first 24 hours of most emergencies, it will still have value. It might not stretch as far because, like you said, there will be price gouging and supply and demand issues. But if you've got a big wad of hundreds, you can grease palms in the short term. But like I've had moments twice in the last several months where I needed cash. One time was because the credit card machine went down in the grocery store while we were there. So they came over the loudspeaker and said, it's cash or check only. Do you know that 3/4 of the people left their buggies where they were and walked out of the store? Because they didn't have
I believe
any
it.
cash on them at all, and they didn't have a checkbook. All they had was a debit card, and when that wasn't gonna, or EBT or credit or whatever else, but the minute they heard no cards, they were out. And the remainder of us, a couple people writing checks, most of us had cash. Like as soon as I heard that, my wife and I, we were planning on like doing like we usually do. We get what we need. We get some stuff to put back in the pantry. Keep filling up the chest freezer. Like our whole mantra on loading up for in our food stock is we get what we need. We get extra. We put the extra away, and then the next time we go to the store, we don't dig into the extra. We put more extra away. That's why our grocery bill is much higher than you would expect for a family of three, but it's because we're constantly banking extra and putting it away for a rainy day. So when that happened, I looked at my wife and I'm like, I know exactly how much cash I have on me. I can get everything we need, but we're not going to be able to we're not going to be able to get the 10 pounds of ground beef and the such chicken. We're not going to be able to get all that stuff because I just don't have that much cash on me. And we didn't need it, but we got everything we needed. We checked out and we went home. And it was an isolated event. But a few weeks ago, I did something very stupid that I haven't done in years. I lost my debit card. I went to UPS actually to mail you your check for those Nods. And I whipped out my debit card at UPS, and it wasn't in there. It wasn't in my wallet. So
Hmm.
I had to pull out a 20, pay for what I need to pay for, retrace my steps. Ended up being the local taco place that me and my wife and my daughter were at 2 days prior. So I just drove over there, showed them my ID, and got my card back. It wasn't an issue, but it was a great teaching moment for my daughter to say, this is why you always carry cash. Because I have cash, I don't have to stop. I don't have to slow down. I don't miss a beat. I just say, don't have the debit card, pay for cash, get this problem dealt with, move on to the next problem. So
Yeah.
like that's why whenever we start talking about any kind of disaster or disaster response, I try to bring it back down out of the stratosphere to say, like you need to have cash because cash makes problems go away. But you don't need cash just if we get whacked with a solar flare that takes out the whole internet. You need cash because sometimes crap just happens. Debit cards don't run, accounts get hacked, accounts get overdrafted, your identity gets stolen. And every one of those things has happened to me in my 40 years of life. Not identity stolen, thank God. But I've literally had somebody clean out my checking account. Cash was what it had to be until I could get a new card issued. I mean, it's just, I've been there and done that.
Yeah. I mean, I had my whoops that basically that my realization last weekend that yeah, I need to start carrying cash on me more often. Excuse me. And basically it was my old buddy and friend of mine and I, we went bar hopping. Uh, Debit card worked all day long. Got to our last spot that we were sitting at and went to go pay, and debit card wouldn't work, and kept getting denied. And I'm like, well, what the hell? So I pop my phone out. I'm like, I know I got enough money, and I started going through. I open up the app, and yeah, sure enough, that would not. The bank had a big thing right on top saying schedule maintenance, services down. And I'm like, one, thank you for I guess letting me know ahead of time. But two, like, yeah, I mean, but it stopped me from using my debit card. Like I couldn't run any transactions at all. And yeah, and so it's like I was like, oh, that sucks. So I walked over to my buddy and I was like, hey, so yeah, you need to pay, which I owe him a few more beers now, but I mean he understood, it was fine, but again, it was one of those like I popped in like I got to his house and I'm like crap, I'm like I forgot to stop at the bank. I said we need to stop somewhere. And as the day went on, we just got further and further out of town, kept forgetting to stop. And then by the end, it was like one of those things you get to the last spot and you're like, oh, crap, forgot to stop. So, but yeah, no, I mean, that's the thing is carry cash on you. Whether it's in a little cubby in your car, you have like an emergency kind of stash somewhere hidden in your car. Uh, or you carry a couple $100 on you every day, for just regular day to day, just in case you need it. I don't know. But yeah, that's just something. I saw that article about the CME, and it just was interesting.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing I would say is like how much cash you carry and in what capacity. That's a personal decision. Like I carry $100 whenever I'm just tooting around town because if I get hung up and I need more than $100, I'm 25, 30 minutes away from home. So not the end of the world. And when I'm here at home, I have people I can tap to bail me out of trouble if I need it. Like if I have exhausted all my own
Right.
resources, which doesn't happen often. But that being said, that wad of hundreds and twenties, that goes with us when we go on a trip. Because as a general rule, and I did this every year we went to prepper camp because that's a 10-hour drive for me. I've done it every time my wife and I go on vacation. I carry enough cash to make sure I can buy enough gas to get from wherever I am home in cash. Just in case we're
Hmm.
like at a hotel or we're staying someplace at a campground and debit cards go down or accounts get hacked, whatever happens, I want to have enough cash to buy our way home. Now, how much that is depends on how far you're going, how many people you're transporting, and whether or not you have to ship anything home. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a big multi-dimensional question. But I would also say like how much cash you carry, quote, in
Hmm.
your home or in your safe, that depends on what your prep level is. Because if I'm in a situation where like I'm not going to be able to go grocery shopping for the next 3 or 4 months. I don't care. I've got food for that long. Like it's like it's one of those things where it's like depending on whether your plan is bug in, bug out. You have long-term food stores. You don't. All those things change that calculus of how much cash do I really need to keep on hand. And I would say for a person who's kind of like single and spring loaded to the bug out position, you probably need to carry more because your default position is to leave where you are and go on foot, and you're going to need to be able to grease palms along the way. Whereas my plan is more, I just need to get home. Once I get home, I have everything I need right here to weather a lot of crap. But speaking of all that, finances, the economy, and the housing market. Let's start with a positive, Andrew. In March of 2019, I signed a loan for the most expensive vehicle I've ever bought. And it wasn't an exorbitantly priced one, but it's a lot for me because I'm a very fiscally conservative person. And that Toyota truck was financed for hair over 20 grand for 5 years. And it's going to be paid off in 8 days.
Nice.
10 months early. So every time we've had this conversation with the listeners, which has been about once a year, we talk personal finance and everything. Because, I think once a year, and I hate to do it more often than that because it's a really dry subject, but I think once a year it's good to have a talk about personal finance because it's so freaking important to be able to do the things you need to do as a grown up and for prepping and everything else. But every year I have this conversation about live well within your means, control your debt, make sure that you plan ahead so that you can make extra principal payments on top of what you're already financing so you can get the debt off your head as fast as possible. I'm paying that truck off 10 months early, and it has cost me about $45-50 a pay period extra. So it hasn't been an exorbitant amount of money. What I would do is I set up the allotment into that savings account that auto debits to my truck loan. I set that up for about $45 or $50 extra. I let it pile up so that I had 2 full months of payments for that truck sitting in that account. Just in case I got laid off, lost my job, whatever happened, I knew the truck was paid for 2 months before I had to start worrying about things. Kind of goes back to the whole having an emergency fund idea. And then once I got above that threshold and I'd get to a certain level, I would take all the extra above that 2-month threshold and I'd lump sum against principal. I've been doing that for 4 years. And I'm going to pay the truck off 10 months early. So it's like I've tried to explain to people before, and this works for any kind of interest-bearing debt or any kind of loan, works for a mortgage, just the numbers and the payoff periods change. But it doesn't take a ton of extra to really make a big difference on the back end, especially mortgages, because they tend to recalculate interest more often. So if you can pay an extra $50-100 a month on a 30-year mortgage, you will knock years off the back end of the mortgage. If you can pay an extra $50 to $80 to $100 a month on your car note, you will knock it down so much faster. And getting out of debt is the absolute greatest flex you can imagine.
Yeah, that's what with my truck. I've only been paying, my truck payment's $460 or $470 or something like that. But I every month so far, I've only had it for 3 months now or whatever. But I've been paying even $500. I've been throwing $500 every month right at it. I'd like to do more, but no, not right now. But eventually it'll be happen. But $30 a month extra. 6 months down the road, and that's a little bit more than what I would have paid. So, but so I'm doing that. Same thing, student loans. I was always paying more and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, well, and an extra $30 a month, do the math, you're talking about an extra $360 a year, which is almost one extra monthly payment. Almost. So you do that over a 5-year loan, and just with $30 a month, you're talking about knocking 4, 5, or 6, maybe even 6 months off the back end of the mortgage or the back end of the loan. Like it really doesn't take a lot of extra, but the thing that the people that, well, I don't want to say the people that frustrate, but the behavior that frustrates me, because like I've had this conversation with friends of mine before, and they insist like, oh, I can't afford $30 extra a month for the car. And I immediately tell them, you bought too much damn car. Like if you can't squirt $30 extra out of your budget, something's wrong. You're way too close to being upside down on everything than I ever have been in my life. And usually I point out to them, I'm like, if you're drinking Starbucks, if you're smoking cigarettes, if you're eating out, if you're doing any of that silly shit, I mean, other than like mental and physical health and personal hygiene, I say you need to find something you can cut and live without so that you can put 30 or $40 extra against your debt. And that little bit extra, I mean, it adds up. It's,
Yeah.
again, like I've said before, I'm not a financial expert. I'm not the second coming of Dave Ramsey. These are all well-established financial principles that I've just implemented. I know they work. So it's not like I'm a rocket scientist or a poster child for any of this stuff. It's just I know it works. And that's why, like, specific to like preppers and survivalists, like I find that there is a lack of financial literacy in that community because it's just not something that's really focused on. But it's like you and I talk about, man, like financial literacy is prepping. It is survivalism. Matter of fact, I just got through having a look at my 401k and reallocating everything because, as topsy turvy as the economy is, I'm trying to read the tea leaves and do the responsible thing to make sure that fund grows so that I can retire one day. Which there are those people out there that scream, very loudly and stridently, like, "Well, the world's going to end and this and the other, so you're wasting your money." And I'm like, "But what if it doesn't end? Like, if the world doesn't end, I would like not to work to noon on the day I die." So having money in savings, planning for retirement, beans, bullets, and band-aids, it's all prepping. It's all preparing for tomorrow.
Yeah,
While we're on that
exactly.
subject,
But I mean,
let's
that goes.
go ahead. There's a little bit of a delay between the two of
Oh,
us.
yeah, there is the man. It's sucking today. No, I was just gonna say that kind of puts us into the next topic of the economy and the housing market. Um, you know, according to our most favored president in all of history, nothing is wrong with the economy. According to him, it's booming. It's better than it's ever been in history. Uh, yeah. So yeah, the looking at the housing market. I don't know. I mean, there's signs that the housing market. I don't know if it's you know I don't think it's necessarily going to crash. I don't think so, but it's definitely cooling down, especially with interest rates at 7% and actually, excuse me, at 7%, and some places actually going higher. I was reading an article this morning about it, and they were saying that basically you're getting into. They're looking at on an average, it's at least three people per home. There's three people that are applying for it, that are putting bids in at
Mm-hmm.
least. And it's just because, and that's the thing though, is because the prices, and that's crazy to me, is like when looking around, prices are not going down. If anything, like for right now, because of the demand, like it's the demand for housing is higher than it's really ever been, and people are buying. But because the market is, it's people, there's not as many houses now. Actually the market's down by, I think, what did I read? I think 30 something percent, if not more, or whatever. I don't remember exactly now, but it's down. So like the supply is down, and so what's that's it's basically supply and demand. Housing prices are going up, and it's causing bidding wars and all that stuff, which is, I mean, that's great if you're a seller. But at the same time, the reason why there's a lot of houses that are not going back out or not going to be on the market, and the demand is going down, or supply is going down rather, is because people are seeing they don't want to get trapped into a 7+% rate. So they're not putting their house on the market right now. And so that's just, to me, that's interesting, because what is this going to end up leading to? And eventually, yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a house, I mean, I definitely would. I mean, I'm not a financial expert at all, but just watching the market and everything like that, it it's cooling down, and that's what a lot of the reports are saying. A lot of the articles I read, the market's cooling down to where now prices are hopefully dropping to another lower, something lower for people. But at the same time, we have banks that are just like, nah, here you go. Like they're doing the same mistakes as they were in 2008 or leading up to 2008. They're doing the exact same stuff, and it's kind of scary to watch it because you're like, hey, I've seen this movie before, and
Hmm.
this is and not only like you've seen part one, now part two they're predicting the next bubble if it happens. I guess maybe it shouldn't say if, but when. But when it happens, it could possibly dwarf what 2008 was.
It certainly could. Um, the housing. Let's work those things in reverse order. The housing market is definitely cooling. Um, I definitely think demand is going to be pretty sharp, or I definitely think demand is going to be pretty sharply choked off at some point in the future. Because the problem is, as inflation continues to be high, as the Federal Reserve raises rates, and those mortgage interest rates continue to rise, more and more people are going to get just flat out priced out of the market. Like you're going to reach a point where, unless you have piss perfect credit and 15 to 20% down payment, you're not going to get into a mortgage. No bank will write it. Like I hear what you're saying about how they're writing subprime, but that's going to end eventually.
Mhm.
Because the other thing that's happening next to the housing market is the commercial real estate market, which has taken an enormous hit from COVID because of all these small businesses that shut down and all these larger businesses that started working remote. So they weren't buying up office space and all these businesses that friggin' went under.
The commercial market's
So,
been taking a hit for way longer than COVID, though. I mean, I
yeah.
remember driving through
But,
town, like just driving through Grand Rapids and stuff, or just the outer towns, and you'd see entire like mini market, markets that were
mm,
once like, I mean, when I first moved here, they were full of all kinds of stores and everything, and now you go through and you're seeing this entire block is vacant. Okay, this entire building is vacant. Like you're seeing a lot of empty commercial storefronts, and it's got to be hurting the people who built it and financed it.
yeah. And don't misunderstand. I'm not saying COVID is the only source of this. I'm just
Right.
saying COVID made it worse. COVID
Yeah.
accelerated the commercial real estate boom or bust that is potentially brewing, almost certainly brewing. And the bigger worry is like, you have to think about it. Somebody owns all these properties. Usually they're on 30-year loan terms just like a housing mortgage is. So the bank owns a substantial portion of them, and if the owner owner can't rent those spaces out sufficiently, they can't pay the friggin' bill on it, which is a huge price tag if you're talking about the kind of land and the kind of building and property plant equipment you're referring to when we're talking about a mini mall or a large outdoor mall. So if they can't rent out enough of those spaces to at least make the ends meet, eventually the bank steps in and seizes it because the owner cannot make the payments on it. And these things are almost exclusively financed. Like very few people have tens of millions of dollars to just build something like this outright in cash. And if they
Right.
did, they'd be insane to pay it all in cash because they'd be better off, at least when the rates were more reasonable, they'd have been better off like getting into a mortgage for the property, taking the money, investing it in something that earned more return than what the interest was from the loan, and they'd make out better in the long run. I mean, this is the kind of thing that this is one of the reasons why millionaires stay millionaires is because they have such a large amount of capital on hand that they can afford to pay cash for this thing at, say, not saying this is the rate or even a rational rate, but let's say 5% interest. But if they can invest in something that makes 7% return, why the hell would they pay cash? That money's better spent over here making more money. It's all about apportioning their assets in such a way that it benefits them the most in the long run. But the problem is if the commercial real estate market continues to take hits like this, the banks are going to wind up holding the bag for all these properties, and the banks don't want those properties
Hmm.
because it's going to turn into another glut, just like what happened in 2008. But when you compare the cost of a couple of houses versus a couple of mini malls, you're talking about so much more money and assets that the bank is going to be stuck with. And if they can't offload it within a reasonable time, these old mini malls and these old, these older commercial structures turn into rat heaven. So you end up with pests, you wind up with squatters, you wind up with all kinds of problems, which then damages the structure further and means more money to get them recouped before you can rent them back out. It turns into like banks do not want to be landlords. They want money. So the commercial real estate market has the potential to be a much bigger problem. But the other thing that people are talking about a lot that I don't have in this bullet point is the auto loan market. Because during COVID, you and I talked about this before, there were some less than scrupulous entities that got the bright idea to count people's COVID stimulus checks and their enhanced unemployment in their income for the purpose of issuing loans. So there were a whole bunch of people driving around $35,000 and $40,000 cars that they couldn't afford the day they got them. And the minute the enhanced overtimes shut off, they literally dumped most of these vehicles. They let them be repossessed. They couldn't afford it. The fun ride was over. Cut their losses and let it go. So now the bank's sitting on all these vehicles that are used, that they cannot retitle, that they can't resell for what they're into them because they're so upside down on what was still owed on the loan versus what the vehicle was worth depreciated or damaged, which has been happening a lot, that those vehicles are stacking up on the bank's balance sheets.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, you have the issue with used and new car prices are not coming down fast enough to offset the fact that new car and used car sales are just flatlining. Same problem as with real estate. Interest rates are going up, and the value of the vehicle is so high, and the economy is so tight. People are not buying vehicles like they were before. They're actually like there's a YouTuber I watch that runs a mechanic shop, and he's actually made the comment that like since in the last couple of years with the economy tightening up, he's seen quite a few people that'll whoop out money out of a savings account and they'll drop $8, $9, $10,000 into repairing, like doing major engine work on a vehicle that they never would have in the past. They'd have just junked it and went and got a new car. But at this point, with like this, you find this a lot with like Toyota trucks. People are spending goo gobs of money to have these vehicles worked on and returned back to working order because when you look at what it would cost to replace a Toyota Tacoma, like if my Tacoma right now just went to the moon and I had to replace it, it would be a $28,000 to $34,000 vehicle. Mm-hmm. Two-wheel drive V6, automatic, quad cab. Nothing fancy, but that's what it would take to replace it. As opposed to if it needed a new engine or needed a new transmission. You see what I'm saying? Like that's the weird kind of market we're in. But all these things are conspiring to slow down. All these things are conspiring to slow down all these residential and commercial markets. At the exact same time, the bank is going to be left holding a lot of this bad debt that they have to write off. Now, where that ends, nowhere good and happy.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting.
Yeah, well, the best thing I could tell you, for the listeners is, if you have debt, please, for the love of God, prioritize getting it paid off. And like Andrew and I just talked about, like $30-$40 a month extra against a loan, and you will start to see that make a difference over time. I mean, this is all playing the long game. None of this is a sprint; it's all marathon. So, I've been watching, and I haven't really seen any good news, certainly no recent news about the pistol brace ban and the efforts to overturn it and the lawsuits. I know FPC and GOA in the Fifth Circuit seem to have gotten a temporary reprieve for their members. I am more than a little irate and concerned about the fact that none of these justices seem to have the stones to just issue a nationwide injunction, despite the fact that this brace ban plainly applies to the entire country. You know what I'm saying? Like, for some reason, that really just rubs me raw. The fact that they seem to be begrudgingly acquiescing to the least amount humanly possible, instead of just popping their head out of their butt and saying, well, this obviously applies to everybody, so why don't we just issue a nationwide injunction, stop the whole thing in place until we can hear this lawsuit. But instead, they have In my opinion, they've said F the 14th Amendment, and they've created one class of people who can do something quote unquote illegal in another class that can't, because
Mhm.
they've only made this apply in such narrow scope. It's lunacy. It makes no sense to me. And I've heard people in the YouTube gun space. I've heard lawyers try to make the case to me about why this was the appropriate ruling, and none of it has gotten past my frontal lobe. Every bit of it has just been like, this just sounds like bullcrap to me.
Yeah, yeah. Tonight, supposedly today, there was oral arguments. FPC was posting about it. They're going to release, but yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting because obviously we've seen where this goes as far as if it gets to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court actually just tossed out, or they refused to hear. There was another case. Um, that they refused to listen to, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but basically, ever since they came out with their Bruin decision, basically they're not listening to any other arguments two-way related, really. It seems like, so if this gets to the Supreme Court, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I'm not surprised, um, but from what I've heard and read, the FPC, GOA, stuff like that, they're making good points. They've made it, yeah. I guess it's interesting that the FPC and the GOA both were like, hey, our members, what their member pool swelled to after they made that announcement. But that's right there. It makes sense though that the judge. I wish the judge would just go ahead and just do a blanket, hey, injunction across the U.S. That would be really nice. But yeah, we'll see. I'm holding out hope. Is it going to happen? I'm not crossing my fingers or buying a lottery ticket or anything like that because I'm not feeling that lucky. But yeah, it's interesting. But the funny thing is, though, is the mass noncompliance that we saw. It sucks that, what was it, 200 and something thousand. It would have been better if it was zero people, unfortunately, people are still gonna comply no matter what, just because the fact that I'm sure they got their boosters and wore their masks all day long too in their car by themselves. But yeah, we'll see what happens with it. I'm curious. But yeah, that mass noncompliance, basically the millions of people who did not comply to the ATF and refused to turn in their pistol brace, register their brace, do the whole entire registration process. It's one thing. I mean, because like a buddy of mine and I, we've been talking. I've been thinking about SBR and a couple things for years. Just never really have. But it's just one of those things where it's like, yeah, okay, I might as well do it or something. But at the same time, it's like now I just want to like be stubborn.
And,
And
and see, like, and here's the thing. Like, you and I have talked about the fact that, like, I've really been resisting the urge to get into the suppressor game for a while, and I have many, many things that are on the priority list ahead of getting a can. But I'm warming up to the idea. But I'm not gonna lie, I kind of have this angry little anarchist hiding inside of me that's just, spitting and cursing from the corner, wearing a straitjacket. And he does not want any part of having to ask the crown for permission to have the things to fight against the government if, God forbid, they ever do crazy stuff. Like, if you're out there in listener land and you're a gun owner and you're a law-abiding gun owner and you have your NRA patch on your range bag and on your sticker on the back of your truck, like, everything I'm about to say is really gonna friggin' set you off and trigger you, no pun intended, and I really don't care. But like, the plain intent of the Second Amendment was to make sure that we could never be handcuffed by our government, period, because we always had the means to raise holy hell if they did something we really, 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 really disapproved of. And if American history is anything to be seen, like, it takes quite a bit to get the people to the point where they're doing spicy things. Like, on the whole, given all the infringements that gun owners have suffered and income tax and all the other myriad of ways that our government has completely and totally screwed us over, we as a society have tolerated that to some degree because we keep telling ourselves, okay, guys, like let's be level-headed about this. We'll fight it in court. We'll vote for the right people, but we're not going to do crazy, spicy things. But the Second Amendment was literally put there as the panic switch to make sure that the government could never become tyrannical, cannot become tyrannical, because contrary to what Uncle Joe says, it doesn't take an F-15 to fight your government. All it takes is about 150 to 200 million people that say, try me, dementia patient. So, like, I wrote an article a long time ago where I said that the Second Amendment is a not so quiet threat, and it was written that way, it was instituted that way, it's been defended that way, and anybody that says anything about the Second Amendment having anything to do with deer hunting is a knucklehead. It is there to make sure we have the means to resist our government, another government, each other, Johnny B. Crackhead down the street, robbers, thieves, murderers, anybody. It is there to make sure that you have the ability to use force to protect your property, your agency, and yourself and your loved ones. Period in discussion. So, all that being said, I have a little bit of an issue with this idea that we have created a two-tiered system by which if you have paid membership dues to certain organizations, you are exempt from 5 years and from 10 years in prison and a quarter million dollar fine. And that's what this preliminary injunction has done. Like, I've read FPC, and I don't blame FPC or GOA for this. Not at all. They have done everything humanly possible. FPC is still in court fighting this tooth and nail, and I owe any one of those guys a beer if I ever meet any of them. All of those guys, GOA and FPC, are tops in my book as far as I'm concerned. They're doing great work. They're fighting the good fight. I'm aggravated at the courts. I'm aggravated at these justices. Like, there is, I would love to be a fly on the wall to find out what their rationale was, but I don't think I'm going to appreciate whatever they have to say. So, as far as all that goes, we started off talking about how to suppressors, but yeah, I have this thing where, like, I really want a suppressor, but the idea of filling out a government permission slip makes me so angry, I just say screw it.
Yeah. Somebody who has 3 now, it is frustrating. I mean, the whole entire time you're doing it, you're just sputtering to yourself. But yeah, I don't know. It sucks.
Especially when Amazon sells, thread adapters and oil filters, theoretically, for educational purposes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. No, but man, suppressors are so much fun. Yeah.
So, last but not least, let me front load this conversation by a little bit of like humble bragging. My wife, at the beginning of the summer, decided that she was going to take the summer off. This is her first year as a teacher back in the classroom. So she decided she was going to take the summer off. No summer job, none of that nonsense. She was going to kind of take a time to chill, but then she was going to pivot towards making some lifestyle changes, which all 3 of us, this whole family, has dove into head first. So we'd been kind of watching what we were eating. We've really clamped down hard on the processed sugar, the carbs, the crap. My wife has had all of us walking 2 miles a day for weeks. As of last night, I'm down 8 pounds. My wife has lost 15. We're getting stronger. The pain in her ankle from that old ankle injury is going away very quickly as she continues to build all the muscles around it that stabilize that joint. I mean, we've been making really, really concerted efforts to improve our physical health, mostly because diabetes runs in both of our families, and we know that.
Mm-hmm.
And as a couple of days ago, I dove off the deep end and started making our own bread, because as much as bread is not a great thing, and we are still like rationing it, limiting how much of it we eat and staying away from as much as possible, sometimes you just want a sandwich or grilled cheese or whatever. And I'm becoming more and more aware of all the synthetic crap that is in our food. Anything you buy from the grocery store, it has sugar in it, has preservatives, has all that nonsense. and I'm just getting as far away from all this humanly possible. So like I've got all my own ingredients. I started making my own bread from scratch. I know everything that's in there now. We already do a lot of our cooking from scratch. There's not a lot of prepackaged processed junk in this house. It's a lot of stuff that's like as far down the food chain as possible so that we can cook it ourselves and know that we're not putting extra junk into it. And then you tell me about then while everybody was focused on the daggum submarine, this pops up. Lab grown meat coming soon to your local grocery store. Thank you, FDA and USDA.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, I've already read at least a couple articles that pointed out that like it's actually it's like the energy deficit required to produce lab grown meat is it has a greater carbon footprint than just having a cow sitting out in a field. So that on the face of it to me is just hilarious because it's like the whole argument about electric cars when people are like, well, we can't drill for oil. It's like, but we can mine for lithium. Like, come on, guys, you're just not making any damn sense. But then there's this part of me where I just got through like walking a lot to get in better shape. And Andrew, you've met me. I'm a chubby boy. I do not like walking. It sucks. Especially sucks when it's in the freaking summer on the Gulf Coast. And it is at this exact moment 93 degrees and 200% relative humidity outside. 45 minutes of walking means I lose 2 pounds of water weight just from sweating. It sucks to freaking work out in this temperature, but I'm doing it, and we're doing all this work to eat cleaner and eat healthier. And now I look through that lens at lab grown meat and just think to myself, what are the odds I'm going to put that crap into my mouth after I just got through spending all this time getting all this processed junk and all this synthetic crap out of my diet so I could be healthier. And unfortunately, I tend to have a suspicion that what's going to happen is this is going to be heavily subsidized by the government. It will become the low cost alternative to meat. And it will not be the ultra wealthy who end up eating the lab grown meat and suffering whatever ill effects come along with it. It'll be the working class. And the way the
Yeah,
economy is flattening the middle class, it'll probably be them too.
yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Is like right now it's just chicken is what they've grown. I know they've been working. I think I've read that they're working on red meat as well. But Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely it's crazy because if I mean, you go all conspiracy theory on it, and it's kind of odd that over the last year we've lost how many poultry, like how many chicken farms caught on fire just randomly. How many, meat markets were closed down because of COVID, and how much like you've seen the destruction, the farms that burnt down. I think there was a farm out west. I don't remember exactly where it was at, but um, cows like burn up. Yeah, and so why? Um, that's what the crazy thing is why. And all of a sudden now, oh hey, we're chicken and all that stuff. It's we're getting a shortage. We're going to have to raise prices on chickens because of the farms and all this other stuff. And all of a sudden the bird flu is making a big comeback and all this crap. And oh hey, by the way, we have this lab grown meat. It's chicken for now, but we can, we're working on other stuff. Like, come on. Like, come on. Like that's not like, come on. It's just it's so there's so much of a coincidence. It's not even funny. It's not even laughable that this is being pushed by the government because they're trying to combat climate change or greenhouse gases. And it's just funny that they sit there and they argue about greenhouse gases and carbon dioxide and all that crap, and a volcano explodes and puts out 3,000 years worth of the same crap that they're yelling at us about. But nope, that doesn't count. So I don't know. It's ridiculous. The whole climate thing is ridiculous. I mean, if you look at like Canada, they're blaming the forest fires on climate change.
Yeah,
It's mismanagement of the freaking forest is what it is.
nine
Like,
forest fires started almost simultaneously across hundreds of miles of Canadian wilderness. I'm effing sure.
well, they actually they I mean they caught somebody that is the arsonist that started a bunch of them.
Mm-hmm.
So they came out. I mean, I think it was people were calling BS, and so they needed a scapegoat. So they just kind of the government was like, "Hey, we're handing you over." But no, I mean
So,
that's the thing though is what
so in other words, they Lee Harvey Oswalded somebody.
yeah,
Like the
basically
CIA killed JFK. We all know that, but they had to have this one stooge to freaking take the blame.
yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the thing is I really feel like the Canadian government, whoever's been pushing this, is like, hey, sorry, they're asking too many questions. You're getting thrown under the bus. It's your turn. Take one for the team, kind of thing. I mean, it go as much you can think about it, the conspiracy theory, all that crap as much as you want, but conspiracy theories in the past year have had a pretty good record of coming true. In the past 3 years, have had a good record of coming true, and so the fact that these forest fires are happening. You look at California, the forest fires that happen out there, where they've proven a bunch of them are arson, and some of them, yeah, some of them strike, lightning strike, all that crap. That does happen. It's accidental. Somebody flicks a cigarette out the car door. Somebody their campfire gets out of control. Stuff like that. That stuff happens. But what
Mm-hmm.
it ultimately comes down to is if you research, if I want anybody who hears this, do some research, look into the mismanagement of the Forest Service in California. Go back, I think it was like the 60s, 70s, stuff like that. They really, really started coming down on the Forest Service. Lots of laws, lots of saying, hey, you guys can't do this, you can't do this, and all the kinds of crap. And that's when you started seeing shortly after you started seeing the spike in forest fires in California because of the
Mm-hmm.
mismanagement of the Forest Service. They wouldn't clean up any of the brush, the underbrush, the dry crap, that the kindling that catches fire super easy that you want for a good fire to start a fire. They don't clean it up. They won't because the freaking tree huggers are the environmentalists and stuff throw fits. So no, they can't do it. So what happens? It dries out enough to where there's a lightning strike, there's someone flicks a cigarette butt out there, or someone's bonfire gets out of control, or their campfire, whatever, and it spreads because it's super dry. And the drought, yes, they have a drought. They go through that, the lack of rain and all that stuff. But it's still not an excuse for the mismanagement of the Forest Service. And in Michigan, unfortunately, I think that Michigan is headed that way too. I've been seeing a lot more clear cut. The Forest Service coming in and just cutting down just acres and acres and acres of trees, and the piles of crap that they are leaving is disgusting. You cannot walk through there without twisting an ankle. You can't. You can't. It's the they're not even cleaning up stumps. There's limbs, everything that you can imagine that is left over from pruning a tree down and cutting it down to ship out. They're leaving it on the ground. How's that?
Mm-hmm.
So yes, Michigan gets a lot more rain than California and stuff like that, I think. But it's still when you have this much deadfall and this much dead limbs, dead wood, and it dries out, there's going to be an increase in forest fires. Hands down, it's common sense.
Yeah,
Like that's what gets me.
and even if we take conspiracy theory, like even if we take conspiracy theory out of this, let's use history as a good analog. Can we agree that history is usually a good analog of the future? Because it doesn't repeat, but it rhymes a lot. So, since we're talking about the USDA and the FDA has authorized for use in the U.S. population no less than a half dozen different drugs that were later found to have horrible side effects. Horrible side effects. Children born with major defects, the opioid crisis you could lay almost totally at their feet in big pharma. And now there are questions about the mRNA COVID vaccines, which I know are still not a popular subject. There's a whole lot of people out there that really get upset when I bring that up. But, myocarditis is a thing, even though people didn't want to hear it. So the FDA's track record of making sure that the products we put into our bodies are safe is not flawless. And the USDA put out the frickin' food pyramid decades ago, which I don't know how to explain this to y'all in terms that doesn't make me sound like a raging a-hole, but anybody that thinks you can eat that many servings of carbohydrates and abstain from red meat is a functioning lunatic. Our teeth are designed primarily to eat meat. Our stomachs have the pH of obligate carnivores and predators. Our bodies are not meant to eat potatoes and bread and sugary crap as often as what the USDA insisted. And I would hold that they are largely to blame for a lot of the obesity epidemic we're facing in this country today, all the metabolic disorders. There is a well known link between high blood sugar and cardiac issues. And there's also a correlation between between a low cholesterol, low fat diet and higher instances of dementia, anxiety, and depression and mental decline. Because cholesterol and the things you get in the fat from red meat are critical for brain health. Now, if any of that sounds like I just think the government is out to kill us all, I don't think they are. Not necessarily. But I do think they're freaking incompetent. So the fact that the government is here to help, the USDA and the FDA put their stamp of approval on lab grown meat means F all to me. I am convinced these people are stupid. I am pretty comfortable saying that they probably got an under the table backdoor bribe because the regulating agencies are captured by the people they're supposed to be regulating.
Mm-hmm.
That's obvious at this point. So,
Well, yeah.
anybody out there in listener land wants to try the lab grown chicken, you let me know how it works out for you. All I'm going to say is the last time I looked at fake meat, it was the crab being sold in fast food restaurants. And what Sonic and not Sonic as much, but what McDonald's calls a burger patty still to this day makes my stomach do flip flops. So lab grown meat, that's a no for me, dog. Y'all try that. Let me know how it works out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting. So, I mean, I can't help but just before we wrap this up, I can't help but think that this is the government's way of the sign off is the government's way of saying, hey, we're here to help. Anytime you, what was it? Was it Reagan that said that? Shoot,
The most
hold on.
terrifying words are I'm here from the government and I'm here to help.
Yep. Yeah. 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 That's what we're hearing. That's what we hear, or we are hearing right now. And that's what we hear very often, almost daily from the government, and it's unsettling. We don't need their help. So, but
Well,
yeah,
not just that, but like, not to sound like a complete crunchy hippie, but I find that the older I get, the more I'm starting to sound like those crazy liberal hippies that I knew growing up, that I
you
used
have
to
the
think were
beard for it.
completely nuts. Huh?
You have the beard for it.
I know. And I used to think they were nuts, and now I'm sounding a lot like them, which is a little disconcerting, to be
You need to
honest.
get you one of those beanies that you can like, the really long, the tall beanie that you can just, it just kind of flops back to the back of the head. You wear it so it covers up half your forehead.
It's not my vibe. I'd rather a boonie cap.
I don't know,
But
man.
like I just like the body we have, guys. It's the only one we're gonna get. We got to pilot it through all of life. And as I've eclipsed 40 and am firmly middle aged now, like I find that I am much more concerned about what's going into me and my family's bodies and what I'm doing with that body because I look around and I see a lot of the friggin' US population that is like, 65 plus and yeah, they're retired, but they're friggin' knocking at death's door. They're on 14 medications. They're in and out of the hospital every couple of weeks. I mean, we're living the average lifespan last I checked was what, 82 years old, I think. But we're spending the last 15 years of our lives basically on big pharma and medical life support. And that's heartbreaking to me. The idea that we're going to spend the golden years of our lives just going from one doctor's visit to the next to try to prolong our life. That's not living. That's not, like having to be in an old folks home when you're 7 years old because you can't walk anymore. That's not living. So I tend to say, we all need to be a little more careful about what we put into our face holes and a little more careful with the amount of exercise we're getting. And I'm not saying all this from a position of like lording over y'all, because I still have a hell of a dad bod going on that I'm trying to work on. But I just think we all need to be really careful about what we're doing to ourselves. We have to start taking this seriously, because like nobody's handing out extra bodies for the second half of your life. And this isn't even about it's hot girl summer and I need to fit into this bikini, or I need to go impress the local girls. It's just about, if you want to have the years to be ambulatory and able-bodied and of sharp mind and be able to take care of yourself and your family, we've got to start. We have, as a community, got to start taking better care of ourselves. And I don't think that starts at Big Pharma's doorstep or eating processed food. I think that starts with lifestyle change. I think that starts with clean eating. It starts with exercise. Like before, like my wife and I, we talked about this on Raising Values real quickly, and this would probably be a good way to wrap this up. But I forget exactly the details, but there's a shot that is being prescribed out right now. It basically is a weight loss drug. It wasn't the original intent, but it was found, through trials that it helps regulate your blood sugar, and a lot of people are losing weight on it, and it is just taken over in this area. There's mostly women, but there's just all these people who are losing 20, 30 pounds getting on this shot that you have to take every so often. I think it's every couple of months. And my wife was offered it by a doctor she's seeing, and she said no. I kind of want to do this in the natural way. Well, my wife's lost 15 pounds, and we're not stopping. So I have to question to myself if the people who are losing all that weight are not going to have a deleterious side effect somewhere down the line. Not that I wish it upon them, but just because history has shown me way more often than I would like that all of these shortcuts, these miracles that are perpetrated by Big Pharma, they always wind up hurting us more in the long run. Hurting us more than changing our lifestyle so that we're healthier people. Hallelujah, amen.
Yeah. On that note, I'm going to go drink beer.
Yeah, on that note, I have to go roast some coffee and make another lump of dough for 2 more loaves of bread and, take care of some stuff. Maybe when wife gets home this afternoon from hanging out with her girlfriend, me and her are going to go walk the neighborhood and fight the battle of the bulge a little bit more. But not sound like the crazy liberal hippie in the bunch. I'm just saying, guys, like, we don't start taking our health a little more seriously, we're all going to pay for it later. There is no free lunch. Andrew is so angry at me right now.
Nope. I just can't wait till this turns into the liberal matter of facts. So on that, see you later. Bye.
Matter of Facts podcast heading out the door. Bye, everybody.